Ethan hated Mondays. The early mornings, the dull conference calls, the endless lists of tasks that always seemed to multiply. At 28, he was far from being the next Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, just another faceless software developer trying to claw his way up the corporate ladder. But for now, he was stuck in his dull little office with his dull little team, doing his dull little job at a tech startup that promised the moon but delivered only small increments of progress. If that, the coffee was terrible. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Ethan let out a sigh as he clicked through a PowerPoint slide that barely held his attention. He had the distinct feeling that no one else was paying attention either. He could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the tapping of keyboards, the murmur of half-hearted conversations about projects no one cared about. There was a quiet buzz of people half zoning out, half awake, existing in a state of perpetual limbo. Ethan? His boss, Brian, snapped him back to reality. Ethan realized he had been staring blankly at the screen, his mind miles away. Can we move it along? We're on a schedule here. Ethan straightened up, mentally apologizing for his momentary lapse. He wasn't sure if it was the endless deadlines or the fact that he was surrounded by people who seemed more like walking spreadsheets than human beings, but he felt like he was stuck in a rut and he didn't know how to get out. Right, sorry, he mumbled, hitting the next slide button a bit too enthusiastically. He forced a smile, running through the final details of the project. A few slides later, he wrapped up the presentation with an underwhelming flourish. Thanks, Ethan, Brian said, offering a quick nod of acknowledgement. Let's keep pushing forward, everyone. The team dispersed almost immediately, and Ethan returned to his desk, his fingers mechanically tapping out code. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly lunchtime. If he could just get through the next few hours, he could finally escape to a long-awaited break, but as he typed the last line of code, the unexpected happened. His screen flickered. At first, it seemed like another glitch, a common occurrence in the office, but then the flickering intensified, the colors on his monitor warping in strange, surreal patterns. His chair shuddered beneath him, and the familiar hum of the office seemed to distort, as though the entire room was beginning to vibrate. His heartbeat quickened. Was this a computer malfunction? A bug? No, this was something different. The air around him grew thick with static, and his body felt heavier, as though gravity itself had shifted. Then, everything stopped. For a moment, there was a deafening silence. Ethan blinked, unsure of what just happened. He raised his hand to rub his eyes, but before he could even blink again, his entire environment, his desk, his chair, the walls around him, began to dissolve into static. It was as if the very fabric of the office itself was being peeled away, layer by layer. What the hell? He gasped, standing up, his heart pounding in his chest. His fingers fumbled for his phone, but the device slipped from his grasp as his hands became translucent. Panic clawed at him, and then, it happened. A wave of color and light washed over him, and he found himself falling, or rather, floating, into something. It was as though he had been sucked into a vortex. But this wasn't space, it wasn't time. This was something else entirely. Suddenly, he was no longer in the office. He wasn't even in the world he knew. Ethan's surroundings transformed before his eyes, and instead of the sterile walls of the conference room, he was surrounded by an infinite sea of shifting data streams. Data, flowing like water, cascaded around him in every direction. He tried to reach out to grab something, but his hands passed through the glowing streams like they were made of air. The colors and shapes were impossible to describe: neon blues, vibrant purples, electric greens. They pulsed with a life of their own, ebbing and flowing like tides. A complex web of binary code glittered in mid-air, wrapping around him, forming impossible structures, strange islands in a sea of light. His mind spun, unable to comprehend the sheer magnitude of what was happening. I'm not in the office anymore, Ethan muttered under his breath, his voice echoing strangely in this world that didn't seem to have a physical form. This can't be real. But it was. It was all real. His heart raced as he tried to focus, but his thoughts kept spiraling into chaos. His surroundings felt like they were alive, like the digital landscape was watching him, waiting for him to make a move, and then, as if on cue, a figure appeared before him, flickering like a glitch in the system. It was a woman, or at least a silhouette that resembled one, but her features were made of flowing code, an endless stream of digits and symbols that shifted in impossible ways. Maya? Ethan's voice cracked. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It had to be some kind of trick, a hologram, some complex augmented reality simulation. But no, this was too real, too immersive. The figure, Maya, flickered again, her form becoming clearer, her outline sharp and defined, though still formed of shifting data. She opened her mouth, and Ethan could hear her voice, soft, distorted, as though coming from a distance. "Ethan, help me." His stomach dropped. The voice was unmistakable, though it was laced with an eerie digital echo. Maya, his best friend, the one person who had been a constant in his life, was here. But how? Why? What was happening? Where are we? What's going on? Ethan demanded, his pulse racing. I'm trapped, Maya's voice whispered, her image flickering more violently now. This place, it's not just a game. It's not just a simulation. I've been stuck here for I don't know how long. Ethan's mind reeled as he processed her words. Trapped? How? Was this some kind of virtual world? A game gone wrong? His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the impossible landscape around him. Before he could ask another question, Maya's form began to distort again, flickering like a corrupted file, until she vanished completely. No. Maya! Ethan shouted, panic rising in his chest, but she was gone. And all that remained was the ocean of data. The floating streams of code. And a deep, suffocating sense of unease. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just lost in a digital world. He was trapped in it. And to save Maya, and himself, he was going to have to figure out how this place worked. And what it wanted from him. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the spot where Maya had disappeared. The waves of binary data rippled around him like a living entity, flowing and flickering, alive with electric hums. His pulse throbbed in his ears, and for a moment, he just couldn't move. He wasn't sure if he should scream, run, or try to reach out to the flickering, ethereal nothingness that had been Maya, but there was nothing left. The world felt endless, stretching out in every direction, an ocean without shore or horizon, only data. He breathed in deeply, fighting the vertigo that twisted his mind. This couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. Maybe a freak accident with the company's VR system? Maybe some kind of glitch? But no, deep down, Ethan knew that this wasn't a simulation, and it wasn't something his mind had conjured up in a panic attack. This was real. He had been pulled into something bigger than himself. Something far more dangerous. Maya, he whispered again, half to himself, trying to focus. I'll get you out of here. I promise. But the longer he stood still, the more the digital world pressed in on him. The data streams curled like smoke, and there was no clear path forward, no way to tell which direction would lead him to her. The space around him felt infinite and confining all at once, like being lost in an endless maze of mirrors, all reflecting the same shifting code that seemed to go on forever. Then, unexpectedly, he heard a voice. Lost already? The voice was light, almost teasing, like the sound of static or a warped radio broadcast. You're not gonna find anything standing still. Ethan whipped around, startled, and saw a figure approaching through the shimmering data fog. The figure was a strange combination of pixelated glitch and solid form, like a moving mirage. Its body was made of jumbled code that shifted constantly, and in the place of a face was a swirling pattern of ones and zeros, glowing against the dark expanse of the sea of data. I'm not lost, Ethan said, trying to sound confident, though his voice cracked slightly. I'm looking for someone. A friend. She was just here. Oh, you mean Maya? The figure interrupted, almost mockingly. Yeah, she was here. But that doesn't matter now. She's not the one you should be looking for. Ethan clenched his fists, stepping forward, a surge of frustration rising in his chest. What do you mean, not the one I should be looking for? The figure tilted its head, the flow of code around it rippling. What I mean is you've got bigger things to worry about than her. You're in my domain now. The sea of data doesn't just let anyone waltz through it. You've got to earn your right to move forward. Or, the figure shrugged, the gesture not quite human. Well, you might get lost. Forever. Who are you? Ethan demanded, his voice sharper now. What is this place? The figure seemed to grin, or at least, the code forming its mouth twisted in a way that gave the impression of a smile. Me? I'm just a guide. Call me Z3R0, if you must. I'm here to show you around. Ethan frowned, trying to keep his composure. Show me around? I don't need a tour. I need to get out of here and find my friend. Z3R0's laugh echoed around him, a strange mix of distortion and amusement. Oh, you will need a tour, believe me. The sea of data is vast, and it doesn't play by your rules. It's not like the systems you're used to. It's living, breathing, well, as much as something like this can breathe. You're not just going to walk in and out, Ethan. You've got to earn the right to leave. Ethan's mind was racing. Z3R0 knew his name. It knew about Maya. How much did it know? And how could it have known all that? The deeper he thought, the more questions popped up, but the answers always seemed out of reach. You're saying I have to earn my way out? Ethan asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. How? What do I need to do? Z3R0's form shimmered, as if it was about to disappear. That's for you to figure out. But first, you need to get a grasp of your surroundings. Learn how to control this place. If you don't, you'll be lost forever, just like the others. Ethan's stomach twisted. The others? Who else is here? What happened to them? They're here, Z3R0 said cryptically, but they've forgotten who they are. Or maybe, they've stopped caring. Once you're here long enough, the sea of data doesn't let go easily. People lose themselves, and when that happens, you stop thinking of the real world. You stop thinking of anything. You just are. Ethan shivered, the thought of losing himself in this strange place far too real for comfort. So, how do I get out? How do I save Maya? Z3R0's smile twisted wider, and for a moment, Ethan could swear the code around the figure surged, like a storm. That, my friend, is the real question. And the answer? It's different for everyone. But I can tell you this, to find her, you need to unlock your potential. The sea of data only responds to the mind. The more you stretch your consciousness, the more you can shape the world around you. But be careful. Push too hard, and you might break yourself in the process. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing with the implications. Unlock his potential? What did that even mean? And how much was he willing to risk? He wasn't sure if he was ready for any of this. But then, looking around at the chaos of data swirling around him, he realized he had no choice. He had to find Maya, and he had to escape before he became another mind lost to the sea of data. Fine, Ethan said, taking a deep breath. Show me how to unlock it. Show me how to control this place. Z3R0 gave a short nod. That's more like it. Follow me. The figure turned, and Ethan followed. As they moved through the endless expanse of shifting code, Z3R0 taught him how to bend the world around him. He learned how to shape the data streams, how to pull and stretch the code with his thoughts. It wasn't easy. Every change, every manipulation of the data felt like a strain on his mind. But the deeper he went, the more he understood how to navigate this strange realm. The sea of data wasn't just a place, it was a reflection of his own mind, a labyrinth of thought and memory, of desires and fears. But as he delved deeper into the sea, Ethan began to feel something strange. At first, it was a subtle feeling, like the fluttering of his heart skipping a beat. But it grew more pronounced as time went on. The deeper he went, the more it felt like he was losing control. The lines between the world around him and his own memories began to blur. A moment ago, he had been in the conference room, standing in front of his co-workers. Now, he was here, learning how to manipulate this chaotic, infinite space. And it wasn't just his surroundings changing, it was his very sense of self. He would sometimes see fragments of his past, things that didn't make sense, memories that were half-formed or altered, like scenes from a dream. At times, he would even hear whispers of voices that didn't belong to anyone he knew. Focus, Z3R0's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. You're losing yourself. If you can't keep your mind clear, you'll end up like the rest. Your memories will become just another part of the data, indistinguishable from everything else. Ethan nodded, forcing himself to push those thoughts away. He couldn't afford to lose his sense of self, not now. Not when he was so close to finding Maya. Ethan's mind raced as he followed Z3R0 deeper into the sea of data, each step becoming harder as the world around him distorted, shifted, and blurred. He could feel the pull of the endless waves of binary, their sharp currents dragging at the edges of his thoughts. The deeper he went, the more the data seemed to form itself into memories. Or at least, things that looked like memories, but distorted, fractured. He could see fragments of his own life, his mother, his father, his childhood home, but they were out of focus, like scenes viewed through a foggy window. Each time he tried to focus on one of them, they would flicker and fade, replaced by new images, new faces. Maya, he muttered under his breath, trying to push the distractions away. He had to focus. She was somewhere in this vast ocean of code, and he needed to find her before it was too late. Z3R0 led him through a series of twisting corridors made of shimmering light and floating data, like a digital maze that stretched on forever. The air, or whatever passed for air here, was thick with static, buzzing against his skin like electricity. The silence in between the bursts of static was almost deafening, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was always just out of reach, lurking in the shadows of the code. You're doing well, Z3R0 said, as though sensing his growing unease. But the sea of data isn't just a maze, it's a reflection of your mind. Every thought you have, every feeling you experience, is being recorded and displayed in real time. The deeper you go, the more the data becomes you. If you let it, the lines between this place and the real world will blur, and you won't know where one ends and the other begins. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of Z3R0's words sinking in. A reflection of your mind. The thought of it made his head spin. Was this what was happening to Maya? Had she lost herself to the sea of data, become one with the endless waves of code? The idea terrified him. If he wasn't careful, he could lose himself just as easily. He focused all his energy on keeping himself grounded, forcing his thoughts into something clear, something real. He couldn't let the sea of data swallow him whole. Focus, Z3R0 repeated, this time more firmly. You're getting distracted again. The more you let your mind wander, the more you risk becoming part of the data. You have to stay in control. You have to want to stay in control. Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. He closed his eyes, pushing the strange, distant images of his life to the back of his mind. He wasn't here to relive his memories. He was here for Maya. You'll have to unlock the next level of your consciousness if you want to save her, Z3R0 continued, his voice laced with something that almost sounded like amusement. But be warned, once you unlock that door, there's no going back. The sea will know you, Ethan. It will see every flaw, every weakness you've ever had. It will test you. Are you prepared for that? Ethan didn't hesitate. I don't have a choice. I need to find Maya. Very well, Z3R0 said with a flicker of approval. But remember this, the sea doesn't care about your motives. It will only care about your ability to control it. And that power, once unlocked, can change everything. With a snap of his fingers, or at least, what passed for a snap in this place, a rippling sound spread through the sea of data. The environment around them shifted again. The corridors of code stretched out before them like the hallways of an ancient temple, but this time, they were more solid. More real. The floating data streams slowed, their movements taking on a deliberate, purposeful rhythm. The colors shifted too, from the chaotic vibrancy of before to a deep, almost hypnotic blue. Focus, Z3R0 said again, his voice softer now. This is the final test. The sea of data will show you things you've buried deep inside yourself, things you might not even know are there. These are the memories that shape you. The ones you've forgotten, or perhaps tried to forget. To move forward, you'll need to face them. You'll need to confront them head-on. Ethan stepped forward, his feet sinking into the data floor. It felt like walking on glass, smooth and fragile, each step causing the world around him to ripple like water. He had no idea where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. He had no idea how long he had been here, no sense of time, just an ever-encroaching sense of urgency. Then, without warning, a sudden flash of light blinded him. He stumbled backward, raising a hand to shield his eyes. When the light faded, he found himself standing in the middle of a scene that he instantly recognized that it was his childhood home, but distorted. The walls flickered with static, and the furniture was warped, like reflections in a broken mirror. His mother was there, standing at the kitchen counter, but her face was wrong. It was like a broken image, pieces of her face missing, her expression blank, lifeless. Ethan wanted to call out to her, but no sound came from his mouth. It was as though the scene was playing out on mute that he stepped forward, his heart pounding, but before he could get any closer, the scene changed. The kitchen warped and shifted, and suddenly, he was standing in his high school classroom, surrounded by classmates who were looking at him with blank, empty stares. The teacher stood at the front of the room, but the words on the blackboard were gibberish, and the chalk squealed against the surface, making Ethan cringe. Ethan, a voice called out, but it wasn't the teacher's voice, it wasn't anyone he knew. It was the voice of someone else. Someone lost, someone trapped. His pulse quickened as he spun around, trying to make sense of the growing panic inside him. His body felt cold, and his hands began to shake. You have to choose, Ethan, the voice said again. You have to decide who you are. The voice echoed around him, but there was no source. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. His heart pounded in his chest as the classroom morphed again, shifting into a new scene, this time, a dark, empty street. The buildings around him were jagged and pixelated, and the streetlights flickered ominously. The shadows stretched long, swallowing the space around him. Maya, he shouted, but the word was swallowed by the silence. He couldn't hear anything anymore, no footsteps, no voices. Only the haunting quiet that pressed against his skull. The longer he stood there, the more his surroundings began to distort. The data around him warped like a fever dream, threatening to engulf him completely. Suddenly, Z3R0 appeared beside him, his form flickering in and out of focus like a broken signal. It's time, Ethan, he said, his voice calm but firm. You've faced your memories. You've unlocked the door. Now it's time to choose. Choose. Ethan whispered, his voice ragged. He could feel the pressure mounting inside him, a weight he couldn't shake. What was the choice? What was it that he had to decide? Z3R0's face shifted, the glowing code forming a smile. It's simple. You've gained control over the sea of data, but at what cost? Will you continue to fight your way out, to hold on to the real world, to save Maya? Or will you become part of this place? Will you embrace it, let it become you, and leave everything behind? Ethan's mind reeled. The thought of losing himself here, of becoming nothing more than another lost soul trapped in the sea of data, was too much to bear. But the temptation to stay, to escape the pain of reality, to reshape the world in his own image, that was powerful, seductive. Maya, he whispered again, as if the very sound of her name would anchor him. The decision was clear. He couldn't give in. He couldn't let this place swallow him whole. I choose the real world, he said, his voice steady now, his mind sharp. I'll find Maya. And I'll bring her back. Z3R0 nodded, his expression unreadable. Very well. But remember, Ethan, even if you leave, this place will always be with you. You'll never truly escape. With a final flicker, Z3R0 vanished, and the sea of data began to dissolve around him. The world shifted, the code unraveled, and Ethan was pulled out, back to the real world, to a place that no longer seemed quite as real as it once had done. He gasped as the weight of his body returned to him. The familiar hum of the office, the soft glow of the fluorescent lights, all felt distant now, like he was viewing them through a foggy lens. His mind swam, but through the haze, he could see Maya lying beside him, gasping for air, her eyes wide as if she had just woken from a deep sleep. And yet, something lingered. Something in the back of his mind. The sea of data had touched him. And as he looked around the room, he could swear that the world wasn't as it seemed. A flicker on the computer screen. A strange noise from the corner of the room. The digital world, he realized, was still here, waiting, and so was Maya, but this time, he wouldn't lose her.